Lord of the Sea. A fateful encounter. As John and Robb clash swords, a moment of miscalculation leads to John accidentally injuring Robb's shoulder. The training session grinds to a halt as Robb winces in pain, his face contorted with discomfort. As John and Robb clashed swords in the training yard, the air crackled with anticipation. John's determination to prove himself as a skilled warrior burned brightly in his eyes, fueling his every movement. His sword flashed in the sunlight as he pressed the attack, his muscles straining with the effort of each strike. But in his fervor, John failed to anticipate Robb's countermove. With a swift feint and a sudden shift in stance, Robb slipped past John's defenses and landed a solid blow to his side. The impact sent a shockwave of pain coursing through John's body, causing him to stumble backward. Reacting on instinct, John swung his sword in a desperate attempt to regain his footing. But his strike veered off course, the blade catching Robb's shoulder with a sickening thud. Time seemed to slow as Robb's face twisted in agony, his grip on his own sword faltering as he staggered backward, clutching at his injured shoulder. The training yard fell silent as the gravity of the situation sank in. Robb's expression was a mask of pain, his breaths coming in shallow gasps as he fought to regain his composure. John's heart sank as he realized the extent of his mistake, the weight of guilt settling heavily upon his shoulders. Master-at-Arms Sir Roderick Castle rushed forward to assess the damage, his brow furrowed with concern. He examined Robb's shoulder carefully, his touch gentle yet firm as he probed for signs of injury. Robb winced as Sir Roderick's fingers brushed against the tender flesh, confirming what they all feared: the injury was serious. As Robb was led away to receive treatment, John stood rooted to the spot, his mind swirling with a tumult of emotions. Guilt gnawed at him like a relentless beast, its claws digging deep into his conscience. He had never intended to harm his brother, yet his actions had led to this moment of pain and regret. The training session had come to a grinding halt, but for John, the repercussions of his mistake were only just beginning to unfold. As he watched Robb being tended to by the castle maester, a solemn vow took root in John's heart. He would do whatever it took to make amends for his actions and prove himself worthy of his family's trust once more. Lady Catelyn's fury raged unchecked, fueled by a mother's instinct to protect her own. Her voice, sharp as a dagger's edge, sliced through the air, cutting deep into John's already wounded soul. "What have you done, Jon Snow?" she spat, her words dripping with disdain. "You, the bastard born of a whore, have brought shame upon House Stark with your reckless actions." John recoiled as if struck, his heart shattering into 1,000 pieces at Lady Catelyn's cruel words. The truth of his parentage had always been a heavy burden to bear, but to hear it thrown back at him with such venom cut deeper than any sword. Tears welled in John's eyes as he struggled to comprehend the magnitude of Lady Catelyn's anger. He had never meant to harm Robb, his brother in all but name, yet his actions had led to this moment of pain and betrayal. I didn't mean to," John stammered, his voice choked with emotion. "I never wanted to hurt Robb. Please, Lady Catelyn, believe me." But Lady Catelyn's rage brooked no room for mercy. With a swift motion, she raised her hand and delivered a resounding slap across John's cheek, the force of the blow sending him reeling backward. His vision blurred with tears as he stumbled, his heart breaking with every step. "You will pay for what you've done," Lady Catelyn declared, her voice laced with icy determination. "You will spend every waking moment repenting for your sins, starting with stable duty. Perhaps then you will learn the true meaning of responsibility." John's heart sank like a stone as Lady Catelyn's words washed over him, a cruel reminder of his place in the world. He had always longed for acceptance and love from his family, but now he feared that those dreams were nothing more than fleeting illusions. As he trudged away from the training yard, his shoulders slumped with the weight of his guilt and shame, John knew that he would carry the scars of Lady Catelyn's fury for the rest of his days. And as tears streamed down his cheeks, mingling with the dust of Winterfell's courtyard, he silently vowed to prove himself worthy of the Stark name, no matter the cost. As Lady Catelyn and Sir Roderick hurried Robb to Maester Luwin's tower, John remained rooted to the spot, his heart heavy with a mixture of regret and sadness. He watched with a sinking feeling in the pit of his stomach as they disappeared into the stone structure, the heavy wooden door closing behind them with a finality that echoed in John's soul. The training yard seemed eerily quiet now, devoid of the usual sounds of clashing swords and laughter that had filled the air only moments before. John's gaze lingered on the tower where Robb was being tended to, a silent prayer on his lips for his brother's swift recovery. But even as he hoped for the best, John couldn't shake the overwhelming sense of guilt that gnawed at him from within. His mind was a whirlwind of regretful thoughts, each one a painful reminder of the consequences of his actions. "I never meant for this to happen," John whispered to himself, his voice barely audible above the distant sounds of Winterfell. "I never wanted to hurt Robb." But no amount of regret could undo what had been done. John knew that he would have to face the consequences of his actions, whatever they may be. He feared the wrath of Lady Catelyn and the disappointment of his father, Lord Eddard Stark, more than anything else in the world. As he stood alone in the training yard, his heart heavy with the weight of his mistakes, John couldn't help but feel a pang of longing for the family he had always yearned to be a part of. He had always felt like an outsider at Winterfell, like a wolf among lions, and now his worst fears seemed to be coming true. But even in the midst of his despair, John knew that he couldn't give up hope. He had to believe that there was still a chance for redemption, a chance to prove himself worthy of the Stark name. With that thought burning brightly in his heart, John squared his shoulders and prepared himself for whatever trials lay ahead. Little did he know, the road to redemption would be fraught with challenges and obstacles, but he was determined to face them head-on, no matter the cost. As Lady Catelyn stormed away from the training yard, her fury palpable in every step, Lord Eddard Stark watched her retreating form with a heavy heart. His wife's disdain for John had been growing ever since the revelation of his true parentage, and it pained him to see their family torn apart by bitterness and resentment. Eddard knew that he had a duty to his family, to protect and care for each of his children, regardless of their lineage. But he also loved his wife deeply and wished to ease her suffering, even if it meant sacrificing his own happiness in the process. As Lady Catelyn disappeared into the depths of Winterfell, Eddard hesitated for a moment, torn between his conflicting loyalties. But ultimately, his love for his wife won out, and he followed after her, determined to confront the rift that had formed between them. He found Lady Catelyn in their chambers, her expression stormy as she paced back and forth, her hands clenched into fists at her sides. Without a word, Eddard approached her, his heart heavy with sorrow. "Catelyn," he began softly, reaching out to touch her arm, "we must talk." Lady Catelyn turned to face him, her eyes flashing with anger and hurt. "What is there to talk about, Eddard?" she demanded, her voice sharp with emotion. "Our son lies injured because of that bastard boy, and you stand there defending him." Eddard recoiled slightly at the accusation in her tone, his own heart aching with the weight of their shared pain. "He is still my son, Catelyn," he said quietly. "And he deserves our love and understanding, just as much as any of our other children." But Lady Catelyn's resolve remained unyielding. "He is not your son, Eddard," she spat, her words like a dagger to his heart. "He is the product of your betrayal, a constant reminder of the woman who stole you away from me." Eddard's breath caught in his throat at the venom in her words, his mind reeling with the enormity of her accusations. He had never meant to cause her pain, yet he knew that his actions had inadvertently led to the fracture in their family. "Catelyn, please," he pleaded, reaching out to her once more. "I know that this is difficult for you, but we cannot let our differences tear us apart. We must find a way to move forward, for the sake of our family." But Lady Catelyn remained unmoved, her eyes cold and distant as she stared back at him. "I will never accept that boy as my own," she declared adamantly. "He is a stain upon our family's honor, and I will not rest until he is gone from Winterfell." With those words ringing in his ears, Eddard knew that their rift ran deeper than he had ever imagined. And as he watched his wife turn away from him, her heart closed off to his pleas, he felt a sense of despair wash over him like a tidal wave. For he knew that their family's future hung in the balance, and the path ahead was fraught with uncertainty and strife. As Lady Catelyn entered Lord Eddard's solar, the tension in the room was palpable, thick enough to cut with a knife. The air seemed charged with emotion, a potent mixture of anger, sorrow, and resentment that hung between them like a heavy fog. Lord Eddard stood by the window, his back turned to his wife as he gazed out at the courtyard below. His shoulders were tense with the weight of his burden, his thoughts consumed by the difficult decision that lay before him. "Edward," Lady Catelyn's voice broke the silence, sharp and cutting like the edge of a blade. "We need to talk about John." Lord Eddard turned to face her, his expression unreadable as he met her gaze. He could see the pain and anger reflected in her eyes, a mirror of his own inner turmoil. "What would you have me do, Caitlin?" he asked, his voice low and weary. "Send him to the wall. Cast him out like some common criminal." Lady Caitlin's jaw clenched with frustration, her hands balling into fists at her sides. "He is a constant source of trouble, Edward," she argued, her voice tinged with desperation. "He has brought nothing but shame and dishonor upon our house. Sending him to the wall is the only way to protect our family from further harm." But Lord Eddard shook his head, a glimmer of defiance shining in his eyes. "No," he said firmly. "I will not abandon my own son, Caitlin. John deserves a chance to prove himself, to make amends for his mistakes. Sending him to the wall would be a death sentence, and I will not be party to it." Lady Caitlin's eyes blazed with fury at his words, her resolve unwavering in the face of his defiance. "Then what would you suggest we do with him?" she demanded, her voice laced with bitterness. "Allow him to remain here at Winterfell, a constant reminder of everything that has gone wrong." But Lord Eddard's mind was already racing with possibilities. He remembered the tragic fate of Deepwood Motte and the opportunity it presented for John's future. With a sense of grim determination, a plan began to form in his mind, a plan that would not only protect his family but also secure a brighter future for House Stark. "Caitlin," he said softly, his voice tinged with resolve, "I have a different idea." And as he outlined his plan to send John to Deepwood Motte, not as a punishment, but as an opportunity for him to prove himself, he could see the flicker of uncertainty in his wife's eyes. But Lord Eddard knew that it was the right decision. For the sake of their family and the honor of House Stark, he would do whatever it took to ensure a better future for them all, even if it meant facing the consequences of his actions. And with that thought burning brightly in his heart, he braced himself for the challenges that lay ahead, knowing that the road ahead would be long and treacherous, but filled with the promise of redemption and renewal. As Lord Eddard delved deeper into his explanation, he painted a vivid picture of the historical significance of cadet branches within House Stark. He spoke of the Greystarks, a noble house that once stood as a stalwart extension of the Stark lineage, their deeds written in the annals of Northern history. These cadet branches were more than just allies, Lord Eddard explained, his voice carrying the weight of centuries of tradition. They were extensions of our own family, entrusted with the noble task of safeguarding our lands and upholding the honor of House Stark. They stood as symbols of our strength and unity, ensuring that our legacy endured for generations to come. Lady Caitlin listened intently, her initial skepticism giving way to a growing sense of understanding. She could see now that Lord Eddard's plan was not just about John, but about the future of their entire house. It was a bold and visionary strategy, one that spoke to the very essence of what it meant to be a Stark. "But why Deepwood Motte?" Lady Caitlin interjected, her curiosity piqued by her husband's impassioned explanation. "Why not another stronghold, closer to home?" Lord Eddard's expression softened with a knowing smile, his eyes alight with the fire of conviction. "Because Deepwood Motte represents more than just a castle," he replied. "It is a symbol of opportunity, a chance for John to forge his own path and leave his mark on the world. And besides," he added with a hint of playfulness, "it is a strategic location, one that will allow him to strengthen our ties with the Northern Lords and defend our borders from any who would seek to do us harm." As the weight of Lord Eddard's words settled upon her, Lady Caitlin felt a sense of clarity wash over her. She could see now that his plan was not just a whim, but a carefully considered strategy born out of love for their family and a commitment to its future. "Very well, Eddard," she said at last, her voice filled with a newfound sense of resolve. "I trust your judgment, and I will support you in this decision. Together, we will ensure that House Stark endures, no matter what challenges may come our way." And as they clasped hands, united in their purpose, Lord Eddard felt a sense of relief wash over him like a cleansing tide. He knew that the road ahead would be long and fraught with peril, but with Lady Caitlin by his side, he was confident that they would weather whatever storms lay ahead, their family's honor and legacy intact. As Lord Eddard contemplated his next steps, his thoughts drifted to the bond between family, a tie that ran deeper than blood and lineage. He remembered the love and camaraderie that had once filled the halls of Winterfell, the laughter of children echoing off the stone walls and the warmth of family gatherings that had brought them together. In those moments, John had been just another member of the Stark brood, his presence a constant reminder of the love and devotion that bound them as a family. Lord Eddard remembered the joy that had lit up John's face as he sparred with his brothers and sisters in the training yard, his determination matched only by his fierce loyalty to House Stark. But amidst the laughter and camaraderie, there had always been a shadow hanging over John, a reminder of the circumstances of his birth and the questions that surrounded his parentage. Lord Eddard knew that John had felt the weight of those questions keenly, that he had yearned for a sense of belonging that had always eluded him. And so, as Lord Eddard prepared to send John to Deepwood Motte, he couldn't help but feel a sense of sadness for the young man he had come to love as a son. He wondered what John would think of his new duties, of the responsibilities that would be thrust upon him in the days to come. Would he embrace his role as a cadet branch of House Stark, or would he resent the burden that had been placed upon him? But even as he grappled with these questions, Lord Eddard knew that he was doing what was best for John and for their family as a whole. Sending John to Deepwood Motte was not just about securing their legacy or strengthening their ties with the Northern Lords. It was about giving John the opportunity to forge his own path, to make his own mark on the world. With a heavy heart, Lord Eddard resolved to do whatever it took to ensure John's success in his new role. He would seek assistance from the king, rally the support of their bannermen, and provide John with the guidance and support he needed to succeed. For in the end, their family's honor and legacy depended on it, and Lord Eddard would do whatever it took to protect and preserve it for generations to come. As John wandered through the tranquil embrace of Winterfell's Godswood, his thoughts turned to Sansa, his once beloved sister, now a distant and enigmatic figure. He remembered the days when they had been inseparable, their laughter echoing through the halls of Winterfell as they explored every nook and cranny of their ancestral home together. But those days felt like a distant memory now, overshadowed by the bitterness and resentment that had come to define their relationship. John couldn't help but feel a pang of sadness as he thought of Sansa, his heart heavy with the weight of her absence. Once, she had been his closest confidant, the one person he could always turn to in times of need. But now, she seemed like a stranger to him, her once warm demeanor replaced by a coldness that chilled him to the bone. He knew that Lady Catelyn was to blame for their estrangement, her animosity towards him poisoning Sansa's mind against him like a venomous snake. He remembered the hurt and betrayal he had felt when Sansa had turned her back on him, her once bright eyes filled with contempt as she echoed her mother's spiteful words. John had tried to reach out to Sansa, to bridge the gap that had grown between them, but his efforts had been met with cold indifference. It was as if she had become a different person overnight, her loyalties torn between her family and her mother, her once unwavering love for him replaced by a simmering resentment that seemed to burn with every passing day. As he stood amidst the ancient trees of the Godswood, their silent presence a comforting balm to his troubled soul, John couldn't help but wonder what had become of the sister he had once known and loved. He longed to reach out to her, to mend the rift that had torn them apart, but he knew that such a task would not be easy. But even as he grappled with his own feelings of hurt and betrayal, John couldn't bring himself to give up hope. He knew that their bond as siblings was stronger than any petty quarrel or misunderstanding, and he was determined to do whatever it took to win back Sansa's trust and affection. With a heavy heart and a renewed sense of determination, John made a silent vow to himself as he stood amidst the ancient trees of the Godswood. He would find a way to reconcile with Sansa, to mend the rift that had torn them apart and restore their relationship to its former glory. And no matter what obstacles lay in his path, he would not rest until he had earned back her love and loyalty, for she was his sister, and nothing could ever change that. As John's mind wandered through the labyrinth of memories, his thoughts were interrupted by the distant call of a young squire boy, his voice echoing through the Godswood like a clarion call. Startled from his reverie, John turned to see the boy hurrying towards him, his face flushed with excitement. "Jon Snow," the squire exclaimed breathlessly as he approached. "You're needed in the Stark Solar. Lady Catelyn wishes to speak with you at once." John's heart sank at the mention of Lady Catelyn's name, a sense of foreboding creeping over him like a chill wind. He knew that his stepmother's summons could only mean trouble, especially given the tension that had been simmering between them in recent days. But duty called, and John knew that he could not ignore Lady Catelyn's command. With a heavy sigh, he nodded to the squire and followed him out of the Godswood, his footsteps heavy with apprehension. As they made their way through the winding corridors of Winterfell, John's mind was filled with thoughts of his siblings and the events that had led to this moment. He remembered the fateful day in the training yard, when a moment of misjudgment had led to Robb's injury and Lady Catelyn's wrath. He remembered the look of pain on Rob's face as he cradled his injured shoulder, the guilt gnawing at John's conscience like a ravenous beast. He knew that his brother bore him no ill will, that it had been a simple accident, but the memory still haunted him like a specter in the night. And now, as he made his way to the Stark Solar to face Lady Catelyn's ire, John couldn't help but wonder what fate awaited him. Would she berate him for his supposed recklessness, for the harm he had brought upon her beloved son? Or would she unleash her pent-up anger and frustration, lashing out at him with words sharper than any sword? As he reached the door to the Stark Solar, John braced himself for whatever lay on the other side. Whatever Lady Catelyn had in store for him, he knew that he would face it with courage and resolve, for he was a Stark of Winterfell, and he would not shirk from his duty, no matter how difficult or painful it may be. Lord Stark's weary sigh echoed in the quiet confines of his solar, the weight of responsibility bearing down on him like a leaden cloak. The morning's altercation between John and Robb had left him drained, the tension between his sons a stark reminder of the fragile balance he sought to maintain within his family. And the ensuing discussion with Lady Stark had only added to his weariness, her insistence on punitive measures for John stirring up a tempest of emotions within him. But even as fatigue threatened to overwhelm him, Lord Stark knew that he could not afford to succumb to it. There were lordly duties to attend to, responsibilities that demanded his attention and his focus. With a heavy heart, he set about the task of transitioning Jon Snow to the role of Lord of Deepwood Motte, a process that would require careful planning and meticulous execution. The scrolls and parchments on his desk seemed to multiply before his eyes, each one bearing the seal of a different northern house, each one demanding his attention. Reports needed to be read, disputes needed to be settled, and alliances needed to be forged, and Lord Stark knew that he could not afford to delay. With a weary determination, he began to sift through the mountain of paperwork before him, his mind racing as he plotted out the necessary steps to ensure Jon's smooth transition to his new role. He delegated some of the more mundane tasks to Master Luwin, the Maester's steady hand a welcome relief in the midst of the chaos. But even as he busied himself with the affairs of state, Lord Stark couldn't shake the feeling of unease that gnawed at his conscience. Sending Jon away to Deepwood Motte was no small matter, and he knew that there would be challenges ahead for his son, challenges that would test his mettle and his resolve. Yet, even in the face of uncertainty, Lord Stark remained resolute. He would do whatever it took to ensure Jon's success, to honor his family's legacy and secure the future of House Stark. And with a heavy heart and a determined spirit, he set about the arduous task that lay before him, knowing that the road ahead would be fraught with peril, but also filled with the promise of a brighter tomorrow. Lost in the labyrinth of paperwork spread before him, Lord Stark scarcely noticed the soft creak of the door as it opened, admitting Jon into his solar. Jon's presence startled him out of his reverie, and he looked up, his brow furrowed with concern. "Jon," Lord Stark said, his voice tired but welcoming. "Yes, please, come in." Jon entered hesitantly, his head bowed as if weighed down by the weight of the morning's events. His eyes flickered nervously around the room, searching for Lady Stark, but she was nowhere to be found. With a sigh of resignation, Jon approached his father's desk, his shoulders hunched with apprehension. Did you ask for me, my lord?" Jon asked softly, his gaze fixed on the floor. Lord Stark regarded his son with a mixture of sympathy and understanding, his heart heavy with the knowledge of the turmoil that had plagued Jon in recent days. He motioned for Jon to take a seat, a silent invitation for him to share whatever was on his mind. "Yes, Jon," Lord Stark replied, his voice gentle. "I did ask for you. I wanted to speak with you about what happened between you and Robb, and to make sure that you're all right." Jon's eyes widened in surprise at his father's words, a mixture of relief and gratitude flooding through him. He had feared that his father would be angry with him, that he would face punishment for his role in Robb's injury. But now, as he met his father's gaze, he sensed only concern and compassion. I'm sorry, father," Jon stammered, his voice thick with emotion. "I didn't mean to hurt Robb. It was just an accident." Lord Stark nodded, his expression sympathetic as he listened to Jon's apology. He could see the guilt and remorse written plainly on his son's face, and his heart went out to him. "I know, Jon," Lord Stark said, his voice gentle. "I know that it was just an accident. Robb will recover, I'm sure of it." John's shoulders sagged with relief at his father's reassurance, the weight of guilt lifting from him like a heavy burden. He had feared that he had done irreparable damage to his relationship with Robb, but now, with his father's words ringing in his ears, he dared to hope for reconciliation. But as Lord Stark continued to speak, John's attention was drawn back to his father's words, his heart pounding with anticipation as he listened to what his father had to say. "I've made a decision, John," Lord Stark said, his voice serious. "A decision that will affect you and your future." John's eyes widened in surprise at his father's words, 1,000 questions swirling in his mind. What decision had his father made? And how would it affect him? Lord Stark hesitated.